Hi, it's Tuesday, May the 10th, and I continue to read and wonder my way through the book of Exodus. And today we're in Exodus chapter 12, verses 29 to 42. And yesterday we left off with, basically everything laid out for the Israelites, right? So God has said the 10th plague is going to come, and the firstborn of every household, of livestock even, will all die except for the Israelites, provided they do the thing, which is to put blood on their door. And that way, when God goes over and sees the house marked, God will stop the destroyer from going in and destroying them. And God tells them to get ready to move, to go fast, and tells them also to remember this. So it's about the unleavened bread, and that this will become a thing that is done repeatedly, done every year to commemorate God's Passover, and will be remembered through the generations. So that's where we left off, and now we're going to see it happen. So here it is, Exodus 12, 29 to 42. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. Pharaoh arose in the night, he and all his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. And then he summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, "Rise up, go away from my people, both you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you said. Take your flocks and your herds as you said, and be gone, and bring a blessing on me too." The Egyptians urged the people to hasten their departure from the land, for they said, "We shall be dead." So the people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading bowls wrapped up in their cloaks on their shoulders. The Israelites had done as Moses told them, and they asked the Egyptians for jewelry of silver and gold and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they let them have what they asked, and so they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. A mixed crowd also went up with them, and livestock in great numbers, both flocks and herds. They baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had brought out of Egypt. It was not leavened because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. The time that the Israelites had lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on that very day, all the companies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. That was for the Lord a night of vigil, to keep them out of the land of Egypt. That same night is a vigil to be kept for the Lord by all the Israelites throughout their generations. So there we go. At midnight, the Lord struck down the firstborn in the land of Egypt. You remember yesterday we were reading that God would keep the destroyer back from striking down the firstborn. So again, we have this. Is it God? Is it part of God? Is it a tool of God's? Is it an angel of God? The angel of the Lord in the fire speaking to Moses in the burning bush. Was that the voice of the Lord, or was that like an angel who could go and do other things? Or was that a way we describe hearing God's voice? The destroyer, is that a way we describe how God also is present in death? I don't know, it's confusing. And if you're reading this the way I like to read these things, it gets more confusing too, because we were just told in yesterday's reading and the one before that about the unleavened bread and how this was a ritual that we were supposed to observe for generations, that we would commemorate the time. That's why we were doing it. God said, do the unleavened bread. Okay? And here we are told that suddenly they realized they had to leave, and so the people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading bowls wrapped up in their cloaks and their shoulders, and on their shoulders. So wait a minute. So they haven't emptied their house of leaven. But I thought that we were told to do that at the reading we just had yesterday, which was just before this. We were told to empty the house of leaven, were we not? And we were told to make the bread unleavened, not to make leavened bread and then suddenly realize you were in a rush. So again, here's where I have wondered about how time exists for God, but also the way that we tell stories and the way we take a present ritual, and we tie it into the past, or we tie the past into the present commemoration of the past. So we were told what to do to keep Passover in what was a contemporary hearing of the story. So when you heard this story as an Israelite, as a young Jew, 2,000 years after this had happened, when you heard that story, you were being given the instructions on how to have Passover, how to observe Passover, and why you did it, and how to do it. But we've taken that commemoration and we've weaved it into the narrative of the time. Although it's contemporary, we've put it into the history. At least that's how I read that. I don't see any other way to read it. So the commemoration that is Passover is rooted in this story of what was happening in the past, but also God's promise has been fulfilled. Right? So we're told the Egyptians urged the people to hasten their departure for the land, for they said, "We shall all be dead." Okay, the Egyptians want them out of there. They know. So God's plan to take this out of Pharaoh's hands and give it to all the people has, in that sense, worked. That's what the story is telling us. God's plan, in a sense, is vindicated. I have wondered about the wisdom of the plan, but indeed, the Egyptians have turned against Pharaoh, and they just want the Israelites out. Do they want them out because they're afraid? Yes. Do they want them out because they feel that Pharaoh and Egypt have treated them badly? Maybe not. Maybe not. But God told them the Israelites will pay you to leave. Said that Pharaoh will kick you out, but also said that they will give you gold and silver, which seemed at the time to be absolutely crazy. I said so myself. But here we are. It's happened. The Israelites had done as Moses told them, and so they asked the Egyptians for jewelry of silver and gold and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. So they let them have what they asked. They felt sorry for them. But again, they were also afraid. So yes, if that's what it takes, then get out. And so they plundered the Egyptians. They did. They plundered the Egyptians, although they plundered the Egyptians with the cooperation of the Egyptians. They didn't break into their homes and take their things. They said, "Hey, can we have some silver and gold?" And the people came and gave it to them. It's a neat little passage. Anyway, then we're told that the Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. We don't know for sure. We're going to say Sukkot is 100 plus miles away, a little more than 100 miles away. The thing is that, so Sukkot means hut, temporary dwelling. There is a festival of Sukkot, which happens in the fall. It's an 8-day festival. It commemorates the time that the Israelites were in the wilderness, the 40 years in the wilderness. That Sukkot commemorates that. So just the same way that it seems to me that the Passover commemoration observance has been woven into a historical story, I wonder if the Sukkot has also been woven into a historical story. I don't know if there was a place called temporary dwellings. But the thing is, they get the heck away from Pharaoh. They get away. And there's 6,000 men, it says, on foot, besides children. We don't count children. A mixed crowd also went up with them, and livestock in great numbers, both flocks and herds. So sheep and cows. Well, the Israelites would have largely taken sheep, I would suspect, but we've got flocks and herds. It's a mixed crowd, which doesn't mean this is men and women. The mix we're talking about here, I believe, is Israelites and non-Israelites. So some of the people in Egypt, having witnessed what was happening, listening to the stories being told, seeing it happen in front of their eyes, they too have decided to follow the God of Abraham and to get out of Egypt. Now, maybe it's self-preservation. Maybe they think that Egypt is about to go Sodom and Gomorrah on them. I mean, maybe they think that things are so bad in Egypt that it's going to collapse upon itself, and so they're just getting the heck out. Or maybe they have been drawn in, powerfully influenced by the God of Abraham, and so they want to go out. I have to imagine that there were some Israelites, descendants of Jacob, who perhaps didn't prepare, didn't do as they were told, and maybe got left behind. I don't know. But what I know is that we have a mixed crowd, and I think that's significant. All of this, for me, vindicates God. Not that God needs vindication. But as we started this, I was thinking, like, what's God up to? And yet, here all the pieces are falling into place. So one of the things that might be conveyed in this story, if you stick with it, and that's part of it, you got to sort of read the story through, but maybe this is another example of how the impossible is possible with God. A few days ago, a few chapters ago, it seemed incredulous that God would say, no, Pharaoh, don't worry. You know, Pharaoh's not going to give you permission to leave. Pharaoh's going to kick you out. And the people are going to give you gold and silver and clothes. They're going to give you so that you can leave. And that's no one in their right mind thinks that that's going to happen. And yet, do we dare believe the unbelievable? That's the question that comes up for me. You know, how often do I make God reasonable? You know, I might pray for your loneliness that you might feel better, but I may not pray for your 4-stage cancer because, you know, I don't know. Yeah. How often do I make God reasonable? I don't want to be confused with those people who believe that you can barter with God with prayer and just get things. You can write a petition to a special preacher who says a special prayer, and all of a sudden miraculous healing happens. I don't want to be that guy. And yet, I do believe that things I don't understand happen with God. I do believe that the seemingly impossible are made possible with God. And after the fact, I may look back and go, oh, I see how that happened. Yeah, but before it happened, I knew it couldn't. I knew there was no way the Egyptians are going to give them silver and gold and clothing. They're giving them parting gifts as their labor force leaves. That'll never happen. It certainly seemed unlikely that Pharaoh would order them out. They had no leverage, they had no power, and Pharaoh wanted to keep them there for the labor. And yet all that has happened. So whether I buy into this story or not, whether I believe it historically, whether I believe it as some kind of metaphor or allegory, what doesn't matter, underneath this story is the idea that God does what seems impossible to us. We may look back and see how it works, but in the face of it, it seems impossible. So if I really believe that, why do I temper my expectations and I temper my prayers? I tell myself, well, I don't want you to be too disappointed if what you're praying for doesn't happen. Who am I managing there? Am I managing them? Am I managing God? Or am I managing myself? Now, having said that, I don't know that I want to go overboard either and just immediately say, sure, everything you want that you pray for is going to happen, because that is not my experience. That is not my wisdom. I fundamentally don't believe that. I believe that God hears us. I believe that we affect God. I believe that God affects us. Do I believe in miraculous healing? Do I believe in healing touch? Do I believe that there are people or preachers who can touch a wound and heal it immediately like Jesus did? I've not seen that. But I have seen people survive who shouldn't have. I have seen things that anybody else would call miraculous and or impossible. Now, is that simply because there are those outlying things, that impossible moments happen? Or is that because of God? And did God do it because that was God's will, or did God do it because I prayed for it or someone else prayed for it? I struggle with that. I remember very, very clearly my mother had a massive aneurysm, and medical science would say there was no way that she should have survived. Shouldn't have survived as long as she did. She was way too long until she got to the hospital. She got to the hospital, and the doctor told me, I remember hearing it, told us, I'm sure, but just my ears, as she went into surgery, that she was not going to come out. It was very unlikely that she would survive. And I remember praying that she would survive. I also remember feeling remarkably guilty the moment I prayed that, because maybe what my mom wanted to do was to let go, and I was felt so conflicted. But I sure wasn't going to pray that she didn't survive. And she survived. Now, did my prayers have anything to do with that? Did God have anything to do with that? Or was that just her number wasn't up, and it was time for one of those anomalies to happen in the operating room when the odds are defeated and the outcome that comes is not the outcome that could have been predicted? I realize I tend to the numbers. I tend to be reasonable and say, well, maybe it was coincidence. But in the moment that I prayed, I believed it. I believed that it could make a difference. And the reason I know that is because having made that prayer as they wheeled her away, I immediately felt guilty when I wondered, oh my God, what if Mom wants to let go? So I did in that moment believe that my prayers would make a difference. I wasn't convinced that she would come out, but I was convinced that God would listen to me, because I almost wanted to take the prayer back, because maybe I was being selfish and I had no idea what Mom wanted in that moment. I didn't know her pain. I didn't know her prognosis. I didn't know anything. In those moments of great drama, I am quite prepared to believe that God can do the impossible. Whether God will or not, I can't force that, but I do believe that God can do the impossible because I was praying for the impossible. But more often than not, I back away from that. I back away from that, and I become very reasonable, and I don't want to get anybody's expectations up too high. There is something to wonder about in this passage. Something indeed. God did a thing that just couldn't be done, and yet, oh, of course it can. Look at that. God did it. Yeah. I may just end there because I got a lot of stuff to think about. Don't worry, I'm not losing my faith. No question about that. I just have to wonder sometimes about what's going on when I'm willing to take the big risk and when I'm not willing to take the big risk. And what it is. What is that? Is that a lack of faith in me? Is that a lack of faith in God? Is that just a wise, loving read of the situation? Yeah. I invite you to think about that a little bit too, if you have some time. And so I can give you some time. I'm going to end now, which is a little bit earlier than I usually do. So I'll tell you what, let me offer a prayer. Loving God, we thank you for this time. This time that is a reflection of our faith in you. We are willing to wonder because we know that you are with us, and that we need not be afraid of what comes next. After we wonder, after we look at ourselves critically, after we make ourselves vulnerable, we need not be afraid because you are with us. So God, thank you for this time of wonder. And God, may our wondering today be meaningful, be hopeful, and may it bring us closer to you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So there we go. I have put the cat among the pigeons for some, perhaps. At least a couple of you I know are going to really be perturbed by this one. So thank you for being willing to be perturbed and to wonder about this. And please come back tomorrow. And until I see you, God bless you. Please know I have no doubt at all that God sees you and that God loves you and that God's love moves through you into the world where it's very much needed. God bless you. See you tomorrow.